This year will be remembered as the year of the Arab Spring, when turmoil, determination, revolution and not a little bloodshed overturned regimes in Tunisia, Egypt and Libya in the name of democracy and started the difficult journey to a different kind of government. In a moment we will be discussing the importance of what happened in 2011 and what it means for other Arab states from Syria to Saudi Arabia in 2012. But first, with his assessment of a year of momentous change in the Middle East, is our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban.
Today there's violence in Syria, political upheaval in Egypt, and a kind of armed truce in Libya. In Yemen, the president has stepped down, although his clan still runs the country. And in Bahrain, the ruler has conceded that his riot police used excessive force against protesters. Did we predict all this dizzying dysfunction last year? Well, no, we didn't. And what can we tell? What's the bigger picture that we can draw from it? That's still very hard to say, apart from the fact that Arab leaders who try to do business as usual are facing an unprecedented challenge. But there are some clues emerging as to the trend of these events. It began in Tunisia. A market trader denied a permit by corrupt officialdom burnt himself to death. Within weeks, the tumult toppled its first leader, President Ben Ali. What happened in Tunisia resonated across the Arab world for two reasons. It touched a common desire for dignity, freedom from petty officials. Also, in overthrowing a long-serving undemocratic leader, Tunisia showed it could be done. Very quickly, there was a copycat effect. Despotic leaders feared a contagion spreading through the region, and they reacted. Now, the way that they were able to fight back depended on the strength of their security apparatus or indeed the tribal structure of their country. In Libya, the key factor was the personality of Muammar al-Gaddafi himself.
They love me, all my people with me. They love me, all. They will die to protect me, my people. No.
And while the Egyptian army stood firm, it was powerful enough to consider its interests more important than those of Hosni Mubarak, who it dumped.
The armed forces make a commitment to caring for the people's legitimate demands and to seeking to follow their implementation within the time frames until the complete transfer of power and the achievement of the democratic free society which people aspire to.
Everyone is in the street. They are cheering that Mubarak's left. Thank God that he did. You can see everyone is in the street. Thank God that he left.
We are very happy. We have nothing except happiness. Happiness. We wish nothing else. We wish Mubarak go out and we will order ourselves.
In Libya, the army was weak and soon fractured, as did the country, along a historic fault line. NATO was involved, bombing on behalf of the Easterners, those who'd fomented revolution in Benghazi. It was the sole military intervention of its kind because Gaddafi was so widely loathed and a diplomatic consensus against him could easily be achieved.
The Security Council has authorized the use of force, including enforcement of a no-fly zone, to protect civilians and civilian areas targeted by Colonel Gaddafi, his intelligence and security forces, and his mercenaries.
In Bahrain, where the emir called on Saudi help to crush protests, there was strong regional support, and a Western reluctance to challenge the power structure. And while the slogans were the same across the region, the outcomes by the end of 2011 were starting to look subtly different. One key reason for that was the variation in local power structures. Elections in Tunisia and Egypt have shown that dignity and freedom are defined for many Arabs in an Islamic way. The longing for a free vote does not necessarily mean then the adoption of Western concepts of fairness or human rights. That's left Egypt's Coptic Christian minority, for example, gloomy about its future. Libya, too, declaring itself free after months of NATO airstrikes, emphasised the Islamist nature of the new government.
Today we are one national flesh. We have become united brothers as we have not been in the past, and we love each other.
And the end met by Gaddafi and one of his sons suggested graphically that this is not a country that will defer to Western ideals of justice. There's now an uneasy standoff between the militia of different regions or tribes. In Syria, too, violence increasingly is defined by the politics of identity. Majority Sunnis versus the minority Alawites and others who cling to power. Places like Homs with a strong Sunni identity have become epicenters of repression. In Bahrain, it's a Shia majority that considers itself oppressed by Sunni overlords that seeks to use democracy to equalize things. But the result is likely to owe more to Arab culture and history than it is to Western notions of freedom and equality. The differences of ethnicity, tribe, or security structures make it very hard to look ahead. Many Arab rulers haven't faced serious difficulties in 2011 anyway. But one thing is clearer as the year ends. That optimists who predicted a happy transition to Western-style democracies that dispense power with transparency and protect minority rights were deluding themselves. It may be no more than a bumpy road of a few months of unrest, in Tunisia for example, but in other places the overthrow of the old order could herald years of struggle by politics and arms, and perhaps even the breakup of some countries.
Mark Urban. Well, I'm joined now from New York by the former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, from Cairo by the activist Gigi Ibrahim, a familiar face on Newsnight during the Arab Spring, and with me here in the studio are the historian Simon Schama, Britain's former ambassador to the United Nations, Sir Jeremy Greenstock, and the Yemeni journalist Tawakel Karman, a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize this year. Now, to all of you, looking back at this year, particularly first with you, Gigi, you guided us through what was going on in Egypt from the beginning, but looking back to the beginning when the revolution was underway, how much did you really expect it to succeed? There must have been moments where you thought you were really up against it.
I knew from day one that it's going to be a long fight. And I mean, I remember even saying this on the day Mubarak stepped down, that this is a sweet victory and a moment that we hold close to our hearts forever. But the real hard work begins now, and it's not going to be easy nor short. I mean, any revolution takes years to settle, whether with a win or a defeat, and I think we are heading to a great start so far. I mean, the street hasn't been calm, and it has been increasingly intense, and mobilization in all of the governance is very increasing, and the discontent against the military rule has been increasingly fast in the past months, and I expect more of that, basically.
Well, from where you were looking at all this, Tawakel, because you were watching from Yemen, did it give you hope when you were watching what was happening in Tunisia and then Egypt? What were people in Yemen saying?
Of course, we are so happy because the people in Egypt, they are protecting their revolution. The youth, they are struggling. They are continuing their demonstration. They want also the army to step down because they don't want anyone to hijack their revolution. We are so optimistic, and we know that the people who are decided to go in their freedom way, they will not go back. That's what happened with the Tunisian and with Egypt and with Yemeni and with all.
And it was very important for you because you won the Nobel Peace Prize for the work you did with women, particularly in organising different peace groups. How important is it in the Arab Spring that the voice of women is heard and continues to be heard? Because that's a key thing, isn't it?
It's very important, and it's very effective, because in our country, especially in Yemen, it's conservative country, and there is no woman in the street before the revolution. And when we just raise our voice, and they sing us with strange way, they laugh at us, but they hear to us.
Yes.
And they say, what are they doing? So we have to follow them, we have to listen to them, and they did.
A key part of the empowerment of all the Arab Spring has been the role and the voice of women particularly. But did you ever think at the beginning of the year it would be so extensive?
No, I mean, nobody, it's a sort of miracle in this way, actually. And whether or not social media and television were the great liberators in a way in which print journalism was a great liberator in the 19th century, we were still really unprepared for the possibility of disintegrating ferocious institutions of military power. I just want to say to sort of Gigi and Tawakel, it seems to me that you're almost too shy about your own cause. The success or defeat of the revolutions around the Muslim world will be determined by women. You've been incredibly brave so far. What I mean is, see, Gigi's wondering what I'm saying, but I'm thinking about the difference between different Islamist groups, between the Salafists and the Freedom and Justice Party. They have radically different views about women's place in the future of politics. So the hinge will be you.
Yeah, and we're still, as Gigi says, there's a lot of dust still to settle before we know that the outcomes and the makeups of these governments. And Henry Kissinger, I wanted to put that to you. The people that had this, was it a naive view or just a wrong-headed view that there was going to be a Western style of democracy? What, of course, is emerging is a quite different form of government in these countries, isn't it?
Well, in the first phase of revolution, it is inevitable that you cannot make a transition from what existed to a Western-style government. It's the essence of revolution that it brings together a collection of grievances and resentments. After that it has accomplished its destructive phase, destructive of the existing institutions, any revolution then faces the problem of giving itself a positive direction. That is what is now going on in each of these countries, and it could not at this stage lead to an immediate Western democracy. So the question is whether it is, as it evolves, it will become democratic, or whether it is a form of democracy in which there is either only one election or one party that is so encompassing that no de facto opposition is possible. That seems to me to be the challenge that emerges as the revolutions mature.
Yes, Jeremy Greenstock, what was the West's role, if any, in actually fomenting change? And was it a kind of prescriptive role? It couldn't be a prescriptive role because, as Henry Kissinger is saying, we don't know what style of governments are going to emerge.
There wasn't a stimulation from the West. This was internal. This was necessary because people realized that they didn't have to put up with rotten government. And what you're seeing in the Middle East isn't actually a regional phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. Something is happening everywhere. The people don't have to have their expectations crushed forever. So it's bubbling up everywhere, but the Middle East was held back the most.
Though, just to stick with that for a moment, are you really saying that there wasn't any kind of Western influence, the kind of rhetoric that was coming out, particularly of America, about the exporting of democracy and so forth, and indeed from the government here, that played no part at all in encouragement?
There, of course, were, I mean, it was Western technology that got communications going.
Yeah.
Western ideals of democracy have got through to other parts of the world, but the inspiration came internally. And there's another factor, which is that all our institutions are gradually fading in effectiveness, governmental and international. And the people want to take over with something more effective. They've got a voice now. It's very important.
And Henry Kissinger, just coming back to you on something that Mark Urban raised in his film, and I want to ask Gigi about this as well, that the danger in all this, particularly, for example, for a country like Egypt, is that other minorities are crushed in the change, in the recalibration. And one of the issues in Egypt is for the Coptic Christians who find themselves, they say, persecuted. There is nothing that can be done to stop that kind of persecution?
There is nothing sorry.
Henry Kissinger first, sorry.
Well, I think there are two aspects. One is, what should be the position of the West? What should be our convictions on the subject? And our conviction would, of course, be that we favor a pluralistic democracy in which minorities' rights are respected and freedom of religion is maintained. Our capacity to bring this about is shrinking by direct action. So it depends on the relationship that will evolve between the West and the emerging countries. The danger that I see is that the democratic processes and slogans will be used to destroy the rotten regimes, and that is a great achievement. But that then a sort of one-party state develops on, say, in an Islamist basis, and I notice that it is often now the Islamists are congratulated when they ask other parties to join a coalition government. But an all-encompassing coalition government means that there is no opposition, no formal opposition. That is a challenge.
Gigi, let me put that to Gigi. Let me put that to Gigi.
It's limited.
Yes, Henry Kissinger, thank you. Let me put that to Gigi. First on the question of how do you make sure that the government embraces all minorities and that there isn't persecution, and what would be an effective opposition?
Well, I think
the persecution is happening from counter-revolution. The persecution is happening from counter-revolution that is being led by the military Supreme Council for the Armed Forces itself, which is, again, backed by $1.3 billion a year from the U.S. and the Western government. I mean, you are talking about the role of the West and in relationship with these revolutions, and it has no positive impact on it whatsoever. I mean, if anything, it's backing up any revolution progress because it's supporting the exact entity, which is the Supreme Council, that are running people over in protest, especially Christians, like what happened with the Maspero massacre.
Let me just put this to Tawakel, because just even the point of Yemen. I mean, as Simon Schama was saying, is which form of Islamism eventually appears in these countries, and as Henry Kissinger said, it could take a very long time. The revolutionaries are never the ones that actually inherit the mantle.
Yeah, the revolution take a long time, and I don't think that the whole country is ever the greatest country in the world that they take their freedom in one way. They in one year they make their revolution and they gain their democracy. I want to say that don't be afraid from people, from left or right. You have to encourage everybody to be part of the political affairs after the revolution. Don't say that Islamist people, they don't have to enter to the political, to the democracy. That means that you encourage some people to be terrorists, to be extremism. No, you have, and also you have to separate between Islamist people and between Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Al-Qaeda, sorry, I want to finish this thing. Al-Qaeda, peaceful revolutions around the Arab Spring. They are against it, and we shut down their voices. Did you hear even one attack since January until now in Tunisia or Egypt or even in Yemen? Any attack from Al-Qaeda? So please don't say that we are afraid from Islamists or even from Salafists.
Yes,
we are attacked by these people.
Yeah. But what is the best outcome in these countries of a pluralist government?
Oh, the best outcome is revolutions. You're all right in saying it takes time. Is one which makes as a very high priority the protection of disagreement. The history of revolutions, as Dr. Kissinger implied, is tragic. More often than not, revolutions which begin with a tremendous sense of unity end in dictatorship. Only the revolutions in Europe, which were a result of the collapse of Soviet power, and the American Revolution before that a long time ago, took incredible pains to protect the rights of opposition and minority groups. Without that, it's a tragic destiny awaits, which none of us hope.
No, well, I want to talk to both Dr. Kissinger and Jeremy Greenstock now about 2012, because there was, of course, this great coalescing around something we could come together, the international community could come together over Libya, because in a sense Gaddafi was this hated figure. Let's talk about Syria and the ongoing trouble in Syria, which is not nearly as clear-cut, and there is no international agreement about how to deal with Syria. What is your best guess about what will happen in Syria in the months to come?
That the opposition won't have the catalytic force to get rid of the regime in Damascus, because they're learning how to repress from what they've seen over the last year or so. They're learning from Iran. They know that if they double up repression, it's very hard to get rid of a regime if there isn't a catalytic majority to take that regime out.
Dr.
You're likely
Kissinger,
to go into civil war, actually.
Dr. Kissinger, do you think it will end up a civil war in Syria?
Yes, I think it will end up with the collapse of the Assad regime, because the pressures will become too great, and a situation either like Libya of an uneasy truce, but with a good possibility of civil conflict.
And one country that we haven't talked about in a sense, which was at the beginning of all this latest foment, was Iran, which was a failed revolution, despite the best efforts of all social media and interventions and so forth. Will it be the economy that will do for Ahmadinejad in Iran, do you think?
I don't know. You can go on actually as the most bitter years of the Chinese Revolution proved, in a state of near catastrophic economic collapse, and the dictatorship will still not be removed. I did want to say that as the economic situation worsens, as it's likely to, a shakedown we've not talked about between rural and urban, between provinces and the capital cities, seems to me likely to play a part. The revolutions are revolutions of urban centres, sometimes of capital cities. And Assad is extremely lucky that most of the fury is concentrated in Homs, while he has basically a subjected Damascus. These things are complicated scenarios which are very hard to see when you just simply have the story of people fighting for liberty and counter-revolution, but they will tell next year.
Just very briefly on Yemen, this coming year, what do you think? I mean, Safa is still there, though we're not in power at the moment.
Yes, it is.
What do you think is the best estimate of what might happen in Yemen this year?
People will succeed, and we're calling the international community to take their duty, to make their rule, to freezing money of assets of Ali Saleh, and also to take him to the ICC. This is the all demands of all people around the world, and around the Arab Spring, when they struggle for their freedom and dignity and democracy. It's accountability. It isn't fair that Ali Saleh and his regime to be out of the accountability, and I think we will win, but we want to win with international community. We don't want to win alone, but people will succeed.
Well, thank you all very much indeed for that. Thank you.